Hi everyone, it's Liam here from Rating the Races. So this week, last week we obviously had Cheltenham. So for this handicap analysis, there's probably quite a lot here that actually ran at Cheltenham. There are some that didn't run at Cheltenham that went elsewhere that we've spotted that could be interesting going forward. But I think a majority of these did actually run at Cheltenham. But I think their handicap drops have been quite kind to them for different reasons. So let's go over those. Starting off looking at Nurse Susan, who dropped £1 to 132. Now I thought that was generous, to be honest, because I thought she ran well for a long way. She actually led all the way to the path inside the final straight and just faded late on. Ended up finishing 11th, looked very tired at the finish. That was kind of expected, wasn't it? 418 days off the track, hadn't had a run, probably needed that run. Still got really well supported, to be honest. Went from 40s earlier on in the day down to, I think she did go down to like 12s at one point. Yeah, a little bit of a late drift back out to 16s. Maybe if Tristan had sat in and just tracked the leaders, she might have been able to get home. She might have run a really nice race. To be honest though, I still think this was a good enough performance to suggest it was a nice return for her. We've got to remember, she also had this layoff back here, we can see on my screen here, 613 days off the track. And she only finished 7th that day when she went off the 3-1 joint favourite in a novice chase for Mares. Now, the level of opposition there wasn't great, and yet she was still only able to finish 7th. Her next two runs, she actually went and won. She, massively stepped forward from those and went and won those the next two races. I think she'll step forward again, and I think the drop of a pound is quite generous, to be honest, for Nurse Susan. I thought she should have been left alone. Where could she go? There is a handicap at Aintree. This 2-mile handicap hurdle, William Hill handicap hurdle, on the 4th of April. Dan Skelton won this. I think he's won it 2 of the last 3 years. He's won it with Langadan, and he also won it last year with Katira. I think he also had the 3rd last year as well. So Katira, the mare, went to the race at Aintree and won. We never know. That race at Cheltenham may have purely been a fitness run. They might not have even been targeting the race at Cheltenham and been going purely for the run at Aintree, but thought, how can we get a really good run into her? Not some silly little event, at Plumpton or at Uttoxeter or something like that. How can we get a good race into her, really get her fine-tuned for the race at Aintree? That could have been the plan. Dropped £1 to 132. I think if she turns up at Aintree in that 2.5 mile handicap hurdle, she will have a massive chance for the Skeltons, who, as I said, have won that race 2 of the last 3 years. Sticking with the Skeltons, I think they have another horse here in West Balboa, who is another one that looks well handicapped now, and she didn't actually run at Cheltenham. She ran at Kempton, and she ran at Kempton in the same race as she ran in last year. Now, last year she finished 6th. They actually won the race that year with Boom Born, before going to Aintree, where she went off the 11-4 favourite. Still ran a nice race. She finished 3rd behind Gwenny May Boy and Lord Snooty, who at the time both looked very well handicapped. They beat Johnny Who. They beat Montmorel, who'd previously won the Potemps final. It was a really good effort finishing 3rd. And she did that off 141. She's dropped in the handicap back down to a 135 mark. Now, 135 is actually the mark she won off when she won this race 2 years ago. And when she won it by 5 lengths. She was the 9-2 favourite, and she was a very comfortable winner. Surely she's got to be going back for that race again, hasn't she? This 3-mile handicap hurdle at Aintree on the 5th of April. She's gone off 11-4 and 9-2 for the last 2 years for it, off marks of 135 and 141. She's back off that 135 mark that she won off. She's actually got form of 113 at Aintree. It wasn't an amazing run at Kempton. It wasn't terrible, to be fair. She was 5th in a race that I thought was a good race anyway. Classic King had good form. Double Powerful came into it, in real good form. And she beat Saint Napolino, to be fair, and she was really well fancied that day as well. So, yeah, I think West Balboa actually ran a nice race here under Heidi Palin. And they can use that as a little bit of an excuse next time out when they put Harry back on board and she gets absolutely smashed up and goes and runs a huge race at Aintree. So there's two of the big handicaps there that I think Dan Skelton could easily win again this year, with this time both with mares. He won it last year, one of them with a mare in Katira. He also won with a mare the year before in West Balboa. So he does like sending mares to Aintree. And yeah, I think they would both have massive chances at Aintree. Moving on to Might I, who has dropped £1. No, he hasn't. He's dropped £2 to 135, which actually means he's back off the same mark as when winning at Bangor earlier on in the season. When he won at Bangor, he beat Aston Martini. Now, we've been a big fan of Aston Martini since. He also beat West to the Bridge, On Public, Zipco. It was a good race, wasn't it? Aston Martini was running off 120 that day. She's now rated 132. So she's up 12 since then. Might I gets to run off the same mark next time. If they reopposed, you'd be really thinking that Might I could potentially confirm that form. I know he was lucky that day to beat Aston Martini because Aston Martini completely wobbled after the last. But he still would have probably finished second to Aston Martini, in front of West of the Bridge, who was running off 129 that day. West of the Bridge, even as a 12-year-old, is still £2 higher because that horse has come out and won since, and has performed creditably on some of his other runs. Yeah, I think Might I is now back down to a mark that he can start getting involved in races again. Maybe the Coral Cup was slightly too far. We need to drop him in class if I was the owner and trainer. Drop him slightly in class. I do feel there's a race that he could win, and it is this race here. It's a 2 mile 3, 173 yards, so just shy of 2 mile 4. For horses rated 0 to 145, so obviously being rated in 135, he gets in comfortably. He's only actually been to Sandown once, and incredibly, that was back in 2021 when he went off 6-4 favourite in a novice hurdle. The winner, the horse that beat him, who went off second favourite, was Constitution Hill. I mean, he was never having a chance of beating Constitution Hill that day, was he? 14 lengths behind him was probably a very, very good performance from Might I. Yeah, I would love to see Might I running here at Sandown at the end of the season over this 2 mile 3 trip. Even as a 9-year-old, I think he would run a really big race. I do think he's quite nicely handicapped again, back down to that mark that he started the season off. Moving on to Jazzy Matty. Now, I think this is an interesting one. So, Jazzy Matty got a £11 hike up to 142 over fences. His handicap mark over hurdles has been left alone on 125. Now, that's where I think they need to take advantage. If we actually go back through his form, where he was running over hurdles over the 2 mile trip, we can see that he won the Fred Winter back in March 2023. He then went to Fairy House and disappointed when sent off the 15-2 second favourite, I think it was, off a mark of 127. Now, that was his only run after the Fred Winter over 2 mile over hurdles. You can always forgive a one effort that doesn't quite work out. He was hampered that day. He was only a 4-year-old. Probably, maybe it came a bit too soon after his win at Cheltenham that maybe that had taken out a little bit more out of him than they thought. They then tried stepping him up in trip. It didn't work. They tried that over fences. Dropped him back to 2 mile at the Cheltenham Festival. And you can see that he was a good winner of the Grand Annual. Drop him back in trip, go back over hurdles now, stick to that 2 mile and go back to hurdles. You can run off 125, £17 lower mark. And there's this handicap here. It's the Killashee Hotel Handicap Hurdle at Punchestown. It's worth 25 grand to win it. I mean, if you win a listed handicap at the end of the season over hurdles, having already won a Grand Annual, that's a great season. And yeah, as I said, I think he'd be so well handicapped here over hurdles that that's where I'd be looking at with Jazzy Matty. And then you can go on next season to go back to fences. He is only, what is he? He's only 6. There's no need to rush into graded company now over fences at all. Drop him back to hurdles, win another handicap, win another feature handicap, and then go back over fences next season would be my plan. Moving on to Murcia, who dropped £2 to 134. Now, I thought she was just very keen, and too keen, at Cheltenham. And she clearly needs to learn to settle in her races. But I thought she ran well enough for a long way to suggest that her current mark, when she learns to settle, isn't beyond her. And the fact that the handicapper actually dropped her another £2 to 134, I thought that was very kind. I think there's an obvious race for her as well. It is this handicap here at Punchestown over 2 mile. It's for 4-year-olds and older, so she gets in. And interestingly, last year it was actually won by a 4-year-old in Pigeon House, with Nara finishing 3rd, who was also a 4-year-old. Nara came into the race in a similar line of form as Murcia would. Came into that race, had been running in okay races, ended up running in the Fred Winter. I think Nara ran in the Fred Winter. She definitely ran at Cheltenham. Yes, that is the Fred Winter. And then ran a really good race here for 3rd. I think Murcia could demonstrate that the 4-year-olds, the 4-year-old fillies do have great chances in this race at Punchestown. That's definitely where I want to see Murcia sent for Willie Mullins. I think Murcia is better than her 136 mark. I think she's definitely better than her 134 mark. Now, moving on to the next one. I don't have a race for this horse just yet. I kind of do long term. I wonder whether this horse, First Street, might end up at the Cheltenham Festival next year over fences. Now, I will not be backing First Street again this season over fences. The reason for that, still a novice. They won't want to lose their novice status with First Street, in my opinion. But I really rate First Street still. I know First Street hasn't won since winning at Newbury back in November of 2022. And as how many runs is that since? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 runs since. Hasn't won. But you can see, runs relatively consistent. Only twice outside the top 10. An 11th place at Cheltenham Festival. And a 14th for Ayr. I think that was the Scottish Champion Hurdle, which is a handicap. Last time out, in my opinion, at Kempton at the weekend, they didn't want to win it. They really did not want to win that. I thought Nico de Boinville gave it a terrible ride. I thought he was so... Well, he gave it a ride for me, that they weren't there to win that race, and they were looking after him, getting him another run, getting him more experience, come back next year. He'll still only be 8 turning 9 next year. He's not beyond, it's not a 10-year-old that we're dealing with here. It's just too late in the day for them to really kick on. Off 127, we've got to remember, this horse previously finished 2nd in a county hurdle, back here. Off 142, behind Stateman. Obviously, that Stateman was never going to be beaten that day in hindsight. So to finish 2nd off a £15 higher mark, he's clearly well handicapped, just needs to get it together. I'd love to see him come out next season in a beginner's chase somewhere, win that over the 2.5 mile trip, then end up running in the Timeform Novices Handicap Chase at Cheltenham in December, and then ending up running in the either the Jack Richardson's Novice Handicap Chase or the Plate next season for Nick Anderson. That's a real crazy long-term plan for First Street. Crazy for a couple of reasons. It hasn't won in 14. How can you expect it to end up at the Cheltenham Festival? It's an 8-year-old turning 9. I mean, am I bonkers? Potentially. Do I think this horse is well handicapped? Absolutely. If he runs again this season in a handicap, and it's a feature one, I'll probably be backing him. If he runs again in a smaller handicap, I might be tempted to leave it alone, because I do wonder whether they are looking after him already now with next season in mind. Next horse I want to talk about is Transmission, who dropped £1 to 132. Now, I thought he was given a strange ride by Patrick Mullins. I thought he was given a ride of, we don't know whether he quite stays this 3 mile 6 trip. With that in mind, why wasn't he running in the Kinmure? Didn't get that. Could have run in the Kinmure. Did they want to make sure that Patrick rode and none of the, it was all against amateurs? Not sure. I don't know what the deal was there. Drop him back in trip, and they can get him involved earlier. They don't have to, no point going forward. That's not what I'm suggesting. But start to move through the field at an earlier stage. Patrick rode Transmission like, I cannot be getting there until like the last fence. And at that point, the race was already gone. The horses in front had gone, and he never got close enough. I'd love to see them drop him back in trip and maybe give him a chance in this race here, the Novice Champion Handicap Chase at Ayr. It's a feature race. It's over 3 mile. He is still a novice, or he's a novice this season. Because he started this season as a novice. So he does qualify for this race, and I kind of feel that he's probably one of the most experienced novices, considering he's now had 5 runs over fences at Cheltenham in the big races. I think he would turn up here as being one of the most experienced novices, and yeah, if he put his best foot forward, I think he could run a really big race there at Ayr, to be honest. That's definitely one I'm keeping an eye out for. That is Transmission. Conflated dropped £1 to 153. I thought it was a decent effort from Conflated. He ran well for a long way. You can actually see that he traded 91.52% shorter than his starting price. Obviously, we were on Conflated, and yeah, ran well. I think he jumped the second last in the lead and made an absolute mess of it, and that stopped him in his tracks. He wasn't going to win the race even at that point. He was just about to be overtaken by a few. But it demonstrated that he's not completely gone at the game, despite being, 11, I think? Let's just have a look. Yes, he's an 11-year-old. I don't think he's gone at the game. I was disappointed not to see him entered in the Topham. I thought going back to Aintree would have been great for him, particularly over that 2.5 mile trip. He finished second behind... He finished second behind John Bond last year in the Grade 1 over that trip. He does also have a second to his name over 3 mile at Aintree. If we just have a look, it's this one here. In the Bowl, when he was beaten by Clanderzobo, he beat Kenboy, Protectorat, Royal Guy. He's going to end up in that Aintree handicap, isn't he? This one, where is it? This one here, the 3 mile handicap. If he needs that 3 mile, maybe he wasn't quick enough for the 2.5 at Cheltenham now. If he needs that 3 mile now he's in a handicap, I'd probably give him another chance, to be honest. And the Irish handicapper dropped him £1. I imagine the English handicapper would follow suit and drop him £1 if he was entered at Aintree. So yeah, keep an eye out for Conflated at Aintree in this 3 mile handicap chase. And talking of handicap chases at Aintree, Ginny's Destiny is the next one. Dropped £1 to 148. Probably wasn't able to dictate like he wanted at Cheltenham over that 2.5 mile trip. They obviously all kind of rushed the tapes. Everything was going for it. Didn't get that clear lead that he wanted, and that probably cost him his chance, to be honest. Still ran a good race for 7th. It was the Cheltenham Festival, so that's probably not a bad run at all. And the handicapper dropped him £1. Now, if you had said Ginny's Destiny at this point last year, who was finishing second at Aintree behind Il Était Temps in the Grade 1 Manifesto, beating Grey Dawning, beating Colonel Harry and beating Blow Your Wad, would end up the following season in the Topham, I think people would have gone, well, you're talking rubbish, Liam. He's not going to end up in the Topham. He's going to end up in the graded races. Well, he's not. He is entered in the Topham. It would be a very interesting one. Because of the national fences, he can get to that lead. and they don't always pester them at the front. They do kind of leave them alone because they're concentrating on jumping the fences rather than racing at that point. If Ginny's Destiny can dictate in a Topham, I think he'd have a massive chance, to be honest. If he doesn't go there, I'll be interested in him returning for the Paddy Power Gold Cup. This season, he went off 3-1 for that race. He actually traded just over even money. He, what's that, 11-10 or just over 11-10 in the run. Ended up pulling up because he fell in the water. That was off a mark of 155. He's now only rated 148. So he'd turn up £7 lower than when sent off the 3-1 favourite and when he traded 11-10 in the run. I mean, he would be absolutely thrown in. I do like him for that Topham though. This Topham here on the 4th of April. Very interesting if Ginny's Destiny gets in there. I might talk about him in another video because I think he's about 25-1 for that. That looks very appealing. Moving on to Crebilly. Now, in hindsight, connections can say we got it spot on with Crebilly. JP can say we got it spot on with Crebilly in the fact that he didn't want to run him in the plate because they knew they were going to win it with Jaguar. Fair. But Crebilly did disappoint himself on his first run over 3 mile 1 at Cheltenham. Doesn't want 3 mile 1 at Cheltenham. He wants 2.5. And they messed him about all season. 2 mile 3 over hurdles, 2 mile over fences, 2.5 at Kempton. That doesn't work out as being a 2.5 race. Yeah, they would. I was convinced they were trying to get him back for that plate. They didn't need to in the end because they had the winner with Jaguar. They ended up running him in the Ultima. Went off 11-1. Finished 9th, beaten 33 lengths. Simple plan with him. You don't go to Aintree. Didn't run great there last year. You go back to Cheltenham for the Matt Hampson Foundation Silver Trophy. It's over 2.5 mile. It's on the 16th of April. And off his new 136 mark, so because he dropped another £2, off 136, I think he would have a massive chance. £4 lower than when finishing second over course and distance in the plate in 2024. Yeah, got to go for that in my opinion. 2 to go. Starting off, not starting off, but this next one I am really, really keen on. American Mike has been dropped £1 to 145. This was probably his best run in my opinion. Over 2.5 mile trip. Let's have a look. Over this 2.5 mile trip, he was beating Factor File. He was beating the subsequent Ryanair winner. He was beating the horse that's probably going to end up in the Gold Cup next year. Over 2.5 mile. That's what he wants. 2.5 mile is what American Mike wants. This season, they've tried 3 handicaps with American Mike. They tried 4 handicaps, sorry. They started him off over 3 mile. Didn't stay. Ran well, but didn't stay. Went off the 5-2 favourite off a mark of 145. He then went to Fairy House, over 2 mile 1. Didn't quite have the speed for that. Was staying on late on. Then went to Fairy House, same sort of story. Ran well again, went off 5-1. Didn't quite have the pace to keep up. Finished 4th. And then went to Cheltenham where they went even quicker and he really couldn't keep up over this 2 mile trip. Finished 9th. The Irish handicapper has dropped him down £1 to 145. Now, that's where I think that's the mark that I think will be in use next time. So at Cheltenham, he actually ran off 148 because the British handicapper rated him a bit higher. It's a long way away, but I just wonder whether this is the plan for him now. The Foxrock handicap chase at Navan. So Gordon Elliott won it this year with Safura. Now the interesting thing about this is Bectiv's stud love Navan. I think they're involved in it, or they at least have they sponsor many races there. So they won it this year with Safura. I think they would win it next year with American Mike if they go there. When I say next year, it's actually this year, but it's right at the end of the year. On the 7th of December it was this year, so early December. This could help you get some of your money for the Boxing Day bonanza that we always have at for racing. Yeah, American Mike just needs to go up in trip. If he runs anywhere over 2.5 mile in a handicap, I am going to be very, very keen on him. I think he will have a huge chance over 2.5 mile. He just doesn't have the pace for 2, and he doesn't quite stay through. And finally, the last horse I want to talk about is Flegmatik, who went up, unfortunately, what did he go up? £4 to 134, which is very frustrating for a horse that I thought was incredibly well handicapped. He bumped into another very well handicapped horse in Bad that they've worked out how to get him to finish his race. Now, Bad has gone up another, what did he go up? 134 to 140, so he's gone up £15 in his last 2 runs now that they've worked out what to do. And he's kind of at the rating now that I thought he would be at the end of the season. But that was at the beginning of the season. I felt that. I think we backed him a couple of times and he let us down. He has now since won for us twice on the trot, and we've made our money back on him, and we've actually made a profit on him. So great. Flegmatik, yeah, I'm convinced he was so well handicapped that even running over 2.5, he was able to run a massive race. If that had been over 3 mile, I'd have backed Flegmatik, and I think Flegmatik would have beaten Bad over 3 mile. That's surely what they've got to do with Flegmatik now. They've messed about with him all season. Eventually giving him a chance of running a race at Cheltenham over the wrong trip, in my opinion. He was just so well handicapped, he ran really well. Stepping back up in trip now. Go and win this 3 mile handicap chase. It's for horses rated 0 to 135. He's rated 134. As we know, his form at Kempton over 3 mile is very good, including beating Chianti Classico. That's beating Chianti Classico, finishing 4th in a Coral Trophy, and finishing 2nd in a Coral Trophy over that 3 mile trip at Kempton. Off higher marks, still off higher marks. He beat Chianti Classico off a mark of 137. He won he was 2nd in the Coral Trophy, a significantly harder race than he would face there in April. He did that off 135, finished 4th in the Coral Trophy off 140. He's only rated 134. End the season, winning a race. And at least you've managed to pick up a win with Flegmatik. So they are my thoughts for the handicaps, or the handicap analysis. There's quite a few here that I'm really keen on. I think Dan Skelton could go really well at Aintree if he sends the right horses. Ginny's Destiny could be interesting in the Topham. Flegmatik to Kempton. And definitely keep an eye out for American Mike over 2.5 mile.